Minister confirmed that the UK is set to drop the last few COVID restrictions come Thursday as he unveiled his Living with COVID plan.
From the outset, we were clear that we must chart a course back towards normality as rapidly as possible by developing the vaccines and treatments that could gradually replace those restrictions. And as a result of possibly the greatest national effort in our peacetime history, that is exactly what we have done. Thanks to our brilliant scientists, thanks to the extraordinary men and women of our NHS, and to every one of you who has come forward to get jabbed and get boosted, the United Kingdom has become the first country in the world to administer an approved vaccine and the fastest major European nation to roll out both the vaccines and the booster to half our population.
Well, but for many people, after 2 years of restrictions and enforced lockdowns, the adjustment to living with COVID is overwhelming.
So, to help make sense of these changes and to ease concern, we're joined by Dr Philippa and psychologist Dr Anna Colton. Morning to both of you. Lovely to see you. Thank you for coming in today. So, there are varying opinions, Philippa, on this, as there always are, on everything. What are your views on the lifting of restrictions now?
So I think that it's really important to see how far we've come and what a different position we were in to March 2020, but to still be cautious and to remember that some rules are changing now and some things are changing in April, and it doesn't mean that we can change the April things now. But that we have to remember that there are COVID harms and there are non-COVID harms from shutting down, effects on the economy which impact health. Our waiting lists are going through the roof for other conditions. We're talking about prostate cancer later and potentially missed patients and things like that. And as the numbers fall, those non-COVID, non-direct COVID harms become more and more and more significant. Sure. And so we need to find the balance of how we move on and live with, not cured from, but live with it.
And so the government were very much advising us to take personal responsibility for this. How easy is that going to be?
Actually, it's something that we do all the time, and we know sort of inherently. You don't send your kid to school with chicken pox, or you don't go to work when you have diarrhoea. You don't go and see a newborn baby or your mum who's having chemo when you've even got a cold. And so we take personal responsibility all the time, and we are hopefully going to continue to do that. And actually, the public have responded to the restrictions incredibly well, perhaps even better than we have ever thought that they would. And that we are hoping that the same sense of personal responsibility and looking after others continues.
I was watching the news last night and there were quite obviously and rightly a lot of vulnerable people who were really concerned. How do you protect, and you said, you know, just don't go around and see them, but I mean, they've got to go out, they've got to do their shopping and things like that.
There are definitely things that we can do. And first of all, I would encourage everybody to go and have their vaccine. Whether or not you've had none, one or two, I would encourage you to go and have your vaccine. It was also announced that the elderly and very vulnerable over the age of 12 will be offered a fourth vaccine 6 months after their third. So I encourage everybody to go and get a vaccine because that will help. And then things will make a difference. So, for example, if you know that you're going to see somebody who is vulnerable, that you still take a lateral flow. You keep your doors and windows open. You meet outside when you can. You wear a mask in enclosed spaces. You continue to wash hands. All of those things still apply.
What about, I mean, you say they sort of take personal responsibility. It's going to be very difficult for certain people when the sick pay is removed. So because then it becomes choosing between your health and your finance situation, isn't it?
Which impacts on your health. This is definitely something that concerns me, that about a £500 extra payment that was been given to people on very low incomes to help support them during isolation. And that is something which is extremely worrying, especially when we are in a cost of living crisis with inflation being high and, you know, fuel, and people are already choosing between fuel and food. If we want people to look after themselves and others, I think that we still need to help them to do that. So that is definitely something which is concerning.
From the 1st of April, free lateral flow and PCR testing to end, except for those at a high risk. I mean, this has cost us, as taxpayers, £2 billion a month. And then we're told also that we're going to scrap self-isolating. We've had this dilemma, we've discussed it this morning amongst the team, that if you were to test and it comes up positive and you know that you don't have to self-isolate, there's a psychological issue going on in your head here. you know you've got COVID and you know you're going to work.
And you also know if you vomited the night before, and you also know if you've got chickenpox but not on your face, and, you know, and all of these things. And yes, you might have the angel and the devil sitting on your shoulder, but we're hoping that people will listen to that sense of responsibility. From April the 1st, the free testing will end, but not for everybody. And they're going to give us more details, because they've said about extremely vulnerable people. They've also said in care homes. And my personal view is that we need to have more information about frontline healthcare workers, because I think if you are patient-facing, and that's not just doctors and nurses, that's physios and X-ray technicians and porters, lots and lots and lots of people in the hospital, that actually we want to protect those. But we also have to remember that that bit ends, but it doesn't mean that we stop testing altogether. There will continue to be surveillance, as there has been throughout this whole pandemic. And we test for things in hospitals all the time. We test for flu and respiratory syncytial virus and all kinds of things. So I imagine that there will still continue to be testing.
Dr Anna, sort of mentally, this is a huge shift for people, isn't it? And I imagine there'll be a lot of anxiety, a lot of feelings of stress and worry about what the future's going to look like. But that is normal?
That is normal. For 2 years, we've lived with really restricted lives. And to get us to comply with restrictions, which everybody did amazingly, we had to feel anxious, because people don't change their lives for no reason. So we've got used to that, and now we need to start to negotiate living a little more like we did before. And so feeling anxious is really normal, but just because restrictions are coming to an end doesn't mean that, you know, you suddenly have to, at a pace that doesn't suit you, relax everything for your own personal life. It's a bit like Philippa was saying with personal responsibility. You know, you can pace how much you move back into society and at what speed. So it's really important people still feel they have a sense of agency and that they can move at an appropriate pace for themselves.
I mean, we've, as a world, I suppose not just the country, but as a world, we've been conditioned now. Mass conditioning because of this. And so for some people, that is going to cause a great deal of mental anguish. And then you've got to balance that with staying in, because that also causes a great deal of mental anguish.
So that's one of the, you know, indirect COVID harms, is the withdrawal from life, the withdrawal from friendships, the withdrawal from social support. You know, we've seen a surge in eating disorders like never before.
Really?
It's you know, those are the harms that I think it's easy to forget about. CAMS have no child and adolescent mental health services. Trying to get into CAMS now, the criteria is so high, it's actually almost impossible. So trying to take a more holistic view of harm and of what we need to do, and getting back out into society, finding some social support, connecting, however slowly, with your networks, is really important.
What about those that are nervous about returning to work? Because although you said, oh, you can move at your own pace here and you're in charge of that, actually, demand is for people to get back into the office. So that's not at your own pace. That's an expectation now.
Absolutely. And different companies will have their policies. But being transparent with your boss or with your line manager is really important. You know, asking if you can grade it. Because many companies will allow you to grade it, so you don't have to go back to 5 days in the office immediately. You know, it doesn't have to be the all or nothing. Having conversations, being transparent, saying, you know, how can I do this? Can I travel maybe for the first week or two when it's not peak rush hour? Because that makes me really feel unsafe. Or finding someone to travel with you for the first couple of journeys, a family member or a friend, so that you just grade back in. It's not about not doing it. It's about trying to find a way to do it that feels contained and safe for you.
Okay.
And there's nothing wrong with us now in feeling positive about this. We've waited a long time.
We've waited a long time. Many people are ready and are ready to go and raring to go. We've waited a long time, and as Philippa was saying, there are other risks, and we don't have to be unsafe. You know, people can still wear masks, they can still, you know, clean their hands very regularly, still be very cautious around immunosuppressed relatives, friends, families. It can be a staged thing.
Philippa, Sir Patrick Vallance and Chris Whitty, who are so brilliant.
Wonderful.
But also quite brilliant at pouring a giant bucket of cold water over our heads just as we start to get a bit positive. We're warning of the dangers of new strains that could emerge. I could get hit by a meteorite. You don't know what's going to happen. And so what I looked at that and thought, oh, let us be positive here now, just for a bit.
I think we have to be positive and safe and realistic at the same time.
There's nothing we can do about that. That's going to come out of nowhere. Then you adapt to that.
Yes, but to reassure people that, yes, viruses mutate, But, and the but is the positive bit, but you already have been vaccinated, I hope. And actually, even with the changing strains and variants, actually, we still have protection. Even if we've had to get a booster, we still have protection. That we now have so many treatments. We have steroid treatments. We have antiviral treatments. We are forewarned. We are in a better position, even with something as simple as PPE. So yes, viruses mutate, and there is probably going to be a new strain coming, and we don't know what is going to happen with that. But we are not in a position that we were in March 2020, when we knew nothing. We now are in a much better and stronger shape.
Thank you. Thank you both very much.